Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and felt his boots hit the metal deck of the space station with a solid thunk. The artificial gravity was a bit lighter than Earth normal, but close enough that he did not stumble. Behind him came Lisa, Chun carrying her collection kit and looking around with wide eyes at the massive docking bay. Ships from dozens of different worlds sat in neat rows while cargo loaders moved between them like busy ants. The Galactic Education Initiative facility was bigger than anything Jake had ever seen. The main building stretched up so high that clouds formed around its upper levels. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see forests and lakes that looked almost like home, except the trees were purple and the water had a slight blue glow. "Welcome to Kepler 442, B," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Jake looked around and saw a tall blue creature walking toward them. The being had 4 arms and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. "I am Vexter, and I run this facility. You must be the human students we have been expecting." Lisa nodded and held out her hand in the human greeting gesture. Vexter looked at it for a moment, then carefully extended one of his own hands. His fingers were longer than human fingers and had small suction cups on the tips. "Interesting," he said. "Direct physical contact for greeting. Most species find this quite aggressive." "Sorry," Jake said quickly. "We can bow if you prefer." "No, no," Vexter's skin flashed green, which Jake hoped meant amusement. "We must all learn each other's ways. That is why you are here." They walked through corridors filled with beings Jake had only seen in textbooks. A group of crystalline creatures that looked like living diamonds chatted in patterns of colored light. Gas-breathing aliens in environmental suits floated past using small jets. Insect-like beings with compound eyes clicked and chirped to each other in rapid bursts. "Your dormitory is in Section C," Vexter explained as they rode a lift that moved sideways as well as up and down. "You will share the floor with Zephyrian students. They are quite peaceful and communicate through light patterns. Try not to shine bright lights at them without warning, as this can be considered rude." The dormitory hall looked normal enough, except everything was sized for beings much taller than humans. Jake had to jump a little to reach the door controls. His room was simple, with a bed that was too long and a desk that was too high. Through the window he could see the purple forests of Kepler 442 be stretching to the horizon. Strange flying creatures moved between the trees like colorful ribbons. Lisa's room was next door, and she knocked on his wall 3 times, which had been their signal since they were kids back on Earth. He knocked back twice, meaning everything was okay. They had known each other since elementary school and both ended up studying at the same university. When the opportunity came to join the first interspecies exchange program, they had applied together. That evening was the welcome dinner in the main hall. Jake counted beings from 12 different species, all trying to eat at the same time. The Zephyrians did not eat at all, but absorbed energy from special light panels. The gas breathers had feeding tubes that connected to tanks on their backs. The insect-like klaxons crunched on what looked like tree bark, but smelled like cinnamon. Jake and Lisa got food that was designed to be safe for humans, but it tasted like cardboard mixed with grass. "I miss pizza," Lisa whispered, and Jake nodded. They had brought some Earth food and their personal supplies, but it would not last long. After dinner, Vexter stood up and his skin flashed bright yellow to get everyone's attention. "Tomorrow we begin field studies," he announced. "You will work in mixed species teams to catalog the local plant and animal life. The planet has many interesting creatures, but do not worry. Our security systems will keep you safe from any dangerous wildlife." Klaxon student raised one of its 4 arms. "What about the reports of aggressive insects in Sector 7? It asked, in a voice that sounded like clicking metal. "The needleflies are a minor concern," Vexter replied. "Standard galactic repellent systems are more than adequate. Your environmental suits have built-in protection, and we have energy shields if needed." Jake looked at Lisa and saw her making notes in her tablet. She had always been fascinated by insects and had written her thesis on Earth's most aggressive species. "Should be interesting," she said quietly. The next morning, Jake woke before dawn. Through his window, the alien sun was rising, and it was slightly more orange than Earth's sun. The purple trees looked almost black in the early light, but as the sun climbed higher, they began to show their true colors. Some had leaves that shifted from purple to green to blue as the light changed. At breakfast, he met his field study team. There was Zixtola Zephyrion, who looked like a walking crystal sculpture. Her light patterns were soft blues and greens, which Vexler had explained meant calm and friendly. There was also Horthkin, a gas-breathing Noxian, whose environmental suit made him look like a ghost. His species had evolved on a world with a methane atmosphere and needed special equipment to survive in oxygen-rich environments. The team leader was Quillinex, a six-armed healer from the Medicus species. Her people were the doctors and scientists of the galaxy, and she carried medical equipment that could analyze and treat injuries from any known species. She looked at Jake and Lisa with curiosity. "I have read about human physiology," she said. "Your species has unusual resistance to toxins and diseases. This should make field work safer for you." "We're pretty tough," Jake agreed. "Humans evolved on a world with lots of dangerous things trying to eat us." Quillinex made a note on her tablet. "Fascinating. Most species evolved past such primitive dangers millions of years ago. They loaded into a hover vehicle that could carry the whole team, plus equipment." Jake watched through the transparent walls as they flew over the purple forest. The trees were huge, with trunks wider than Earth's redwoods. Strange creatures moved through the branches, and colorful birds flew in flocks that changed shape like living clouds. "Beautiful," Lisa said as she recorded everything with her camera. "The biodiversity here must be incredible." The vehicle landed in a clearing near a stream that glowed with the same blue light they had seen from the space station. Quillinex ran her scanners over the area. Radiation levels normal, air quality acceptable for all species. Temperature within comfortable range. "You may exit the vehicle." Jake stepped out and immediately felt the difference. The air was thicker than Earth air and had a sweet smell like flowers mixed with ozone. The gravity was lighter, which made him feel like he could jump higher and run faster. Lisa landed beside him and grinned. "This is going to be fun," she said. The second day of field research started like the first, with clear skies and the orange sun rising over the purple forest. Jake had slept well despite the strange sounds outside his window. Lisa knocked on his wall 4 times, which meant she was excited about something. He knocked back once, asking what was up. "Come see this," she called through the wall. Jake went to her room and found her at the window with her camera. Below them in the courtyard, a group of small flying creatures were dancing in complex patterns. They looked like hummingbirds, but with 6 wings and scales that changed color. "Amazing," Jake said. "Are those the ones Quillinex mentioned yesterday?" "I think so. She called them harmony birds because they never fly alone. Watch how they move together like they share one mind." At breakfast, Quillinex was reviewing the mission plan on her tablet. Today, they would venture deeper into the forest to an area called the Grove of Whispers. The name came from the sound the wind made through special trees whose leaves were shaped like tiny bells. "The area has not been fully surveyed," Quillinex explained. "We may encounter species not yet cataloged. Remember to maintain safe distances and let me scan everything before you approach." Zixtal flashed yellow and blue patterns, which Jake was learning meant questions or concerns. Quillinex nodded and replied to the light display. "She asks about the insect reports from Sector 7. I have checked with facility security and they confirm the needleflies are active, but our equipment should protect us." Horthgen spoke through his suit's translation system. "My people have dealt with aggressive insects before. They are usually more afraid of us than we are of them." Jake and Lisa exchanged glances. Growing up on Earth had taught them that insects were never afraid of anything. If anything, they seemed to get more aggressive when threatened. But they kept quiet since they were still new to the group. The hover vehicle carried them deeper into the forest than they had gone before. The trees here were even larger and grew so close together that little sunlight reached the ground. Strange. Glowing fungi provided most of the light, and the air felt thick and humid like a greenhouse. They landed near a cluster of the bell-leaf trees, and Jake could immediately hear the whispers that gave the grove its name. The sound was beautiful and eerie at the same time, like voices speaking in a language he almost understood. Fascinating, Quillinex said as she took readings. The trees are not just making noise. They are actually communicating through chemical signals carried by the sound waves. A form of botanical language. Lisa was already taking pictures and collecting samples of the soil. The fungal network here is incredible, she said. I think the trees and fungi are working together, sharing nutrients and information. Jake walked to the edge of the clearing where different types of plants grew in the brighter light. He recognized some basic plant structures from his botany classes, but everything here was alien. Leaves that moved on their own. Flowers that changed color. When he approached, vines that seemed to watch him with eye-like pods. Stay close to the group, Quillinex called. We do not know what defensive mechanisms these plants might have. That was when they heard the buzzing dot. At first, it sounded like a distant motor or generator, but it grew louder quickly. Jake looked up and saw a dark cloud moving through the trees toward them. As it got closer, he realized it was not a cloud at all, but thousands of tiny flying insects moving together like a living storm. Needle flies, Horthkin said, and his voice sounded worried even through the translator. More than the reports indicated, Quillinex activated her scanner and the device started beeping rapidly. Massive swarm. Estimated 10,000 individuals. All team members activate protection systems immediately. Zixtal's crystal body began to glow brighter as her natural defenses kicked in. Horthkin sealed his environmental suit and activated an energy field around himself. Quillinex deployed a medical shield that created a bubble of safe space around her. Jake and Lisa looked at each other. They had basic environmental suits, but nothing like the advanced protection the aliens carried. What do we do? Lisa asked. Stay behind me, Quillinex called. My medical shield should protect all of us. The swarm hit like a living tsunami. The needle flies were tiny things no bigger than earth mosquitoes, but they moved with terrifying purpose. They ignored the energy shields, completely passing through them like they were not there. Horthkin's environmental suit sparked as dozens of the insects found gaps in his protection. Zixtal's crystal body began to crack under stress as the needle flies bit right through her natural armor. Her light patterns turned red and white, which Jake realized meant pain and fear. She made a sound like breaking glass as she fell to her knees. Impossible, Quillinex said as her scanner showed the insects passing through her medical shield like it was air. Standard galactic protection should stop any known insect species. The needle flies swarmed over Horthkin and his suit systems began failing. Alarms blared as his life support struggled to maintain pressure. He stumbled and fell, gasping as his breathing apparatus clogged with insects. Jake felt the first stings on his arms and neck. The needle flies lived up to their name, with needle-sharp proboscis that punched through his suit material like paper. The pain was immediate and intense, like being stabbed with tiny hot knives. But he stayed on his feet. Lisa cried out as she was stung dozens of times, but she kept moving, helping Zixtal stand up. We need to get out of here, she yelled over the buzzing of the swarm. More team members were falling. A Klaxon student collapsed, twitching as the foreign toxins overwhelmed his system. Two Zephyrians lay motionless, their crystal bodies dark and cracked. Even species from worlds with dangerous insects seemed helpless against these creatures. Jake grabbed Horthkin under the arms and started dragging him toward the hover vehicle. The gas breather was twice his size, but the light gravity helped. Lisa supported Zixtal, whose light patterns were now just weak, flickering pulses. My medical scanners show massive toxic reactions in all non-human team members, Quillinex reported, as she struggled to stay conscious. The needlefly venom contains proteins unknown to galactic medical databases. The retreat to the vehicles was chaos. Students from multiple species stumbled through the forest, bleeding from hundreds of tiny wounds. The needleflies followed relentlessly, seeming to grow more aggressive rather than less. Jake counted at least 15 beings down with toxic shock. Emergency evacuation protocol, came Vexler's voice over the communication system. All field teams return immediately. Medical teams standing by, Jake helped load the unconscious aliens into the hover vehicles. His arms and neck burned from dozens of stings, but he could still function. Lisa was in similar condition, bleeding but alert. Around them, beings that had evolved on worlds across the galaxy lay helpless from the bites of creatures no bigger than Earth gnats. As the vehicles lifted off, Jake looked back at the grove of whispers. The swarm of needleflies had settled back into the trees as if nothing had happened, but he could see more dark clouds moving in the distance. This was not just one swarm, but many. "How are you still conscious?" Quillinex asked weakly as she tried to treat the other patients. "My scanners show you have been stung more than 30 times each." Jake looked at Lisa, who was using her shirt to bandage a cut on Zixtal's arm. They were hurt, but not disabled like the aliens. "I guess humans are just tough," he said. Tough, Quillinex repeated the word like it was foreign. Most species evolved past the need for such primitive resilience. The medical bay was in chaos when they arrived. Healers from multiple species worked frantically to treat victims of needlefly venom. Advanced medical computers ran analysis after analysis trying to understand toxins they had never encountered. 3 students were in critical condition, and more were arriving from other field sites. Jake and Lisa were treated quickly with basic first aid and released. Their stings hurt but showed no signs of the severe reactions affecting the other species. As they walked back to their dormitory, Jake noticed something that made him stop. The needleflies were not just in the deep forest anymore. Small groups of them moved through the facility grounds, staying close to certain types of plants. But they seemed to avoid other areas completely, as if something was keeping them away. "Lisa," he said, pointing to a cluster of broad-leafed plants near the main building. "Look at those leaves. Do they remind you of anything?" Lisa studied the plants and her eyes widened. "They look like citronella," she said, "and maybe eucalyptus. Plants we use on Earth to keep insects away." Jake nodded. "Natural insect repellent? Maybe that is why the needleflies avoid those areas." "Do you think?" Lisa started, then stopped. "No, that is too simple." "Simple does not mean wrong," Jake said. "Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones." Jake woke before dawn with his arms and neck still burning from the needlefly stings. Through his window, he could see medical vehicles still arriving at the facility, bringing more victims from distant field sites. The alien students were not recovering as quickly as the medical staff had hoped. Lisa knocked on his wall 5 times, which was their signal for emergency or important discovery. He knocked back and heard her door open. She appeared in his doorway, holding her tablet and looking excited despite the early hour. "I have been thinking about those plants all night," she said. "The ones near the main building where no needleflies were flying. I looked them up in the facility database and found something interesting." Jake sat up and rubbed his eyes. "What did you find?" "The database lists them as Kepler bellwort. Native to this planet, but classified as having no significant chemical properties." "But look at this molecular structure." She showed him the tablet screen with complex chemical diagrams. "The active compounds are almost identical to citronella and eucalyptus from Earth, plants that humans have used to repel insects for thousands of years," Jake said, understanding immediately. "Before we had synthetic chemicals, we used what nature provided." "Exactly. But here is the interesting part. The Galactic database dismissed these compounds as chemically insignificant because advanced species do not use plant-based solutions anymore. They rely on energy shields and synthetic repellents." Jake stood up and looked out his window at the purple forest. In the growing daylight, he could see more swarms of needleflies moving between the trees like dark clouds, which obviously do not work against these insects. "Right, the needleflies have evolved on this planet for millions of years. They have natural resistance to artificial deterrents, but they still respond to the chemical signals from native plants." There was a soft chime from the room's communication system, and Vexler's voice filled the air. "All students report to the main assembly hall immediately. We have important safety information to share." The assembly hall was packed with beings from 12 different species, but Jake noticed how many empty seats there were. Nearly half the students were still in the medical bay or had been evacuated off-world for advanced treatment. The remaining students looked scared and many showed signs of needlefly stings. Vexler's skin was a worried gray color as he addressed the crowd. Fellow students, we face an unprecedented situation. The needlefly swarms are more aggressive and numerous than our surveys indicated. More importantly, our standard protection systems have proven inadequate, a Claxon student clicked nervously. Are we suspending field studies until better protection arrives? That is under consideration, Vexler replied. However, supply ships from the Galactic Medical Authority will not arrive for 6 standard days. We are working to synthesize new repellent compounds, but this will take time. Jake looked at Lisa and saw she was making the same decision he was. He stood up and several alien heads turned to look at him. Sir, I may have a solution, the assembly hall grew quiet. Vexler's skin shifted to blue, which Jake hoped meant interest rather than annoyance. Please explain, human Jake. The needleflies avoid certain areas of the facility grounds where specific plants grow. These plants contain natural compounds that repel insects. My species has used similar plants for protection for thousands of years, Azafrian flashed skeptical yellow patterns. Quillinex, who was in the audience with bandages on 3 of her 6 arms, translated. She asks how primitive plant chemistry could succeed where advanced galactic science has failed. Sometimes the old ways work because they have been tested by time, Jake replied. These plants and insects evolved together. The plants developed chemical defenses and the insects learned to avoid them. Interesting theory, Vexler said. But how would you test this safely? Let me gather some of the plants and prepare them the way humans do, Jake said. If it works, Lisa and I can demonstrate the protection. There was immediate objection from the alien students. The idea of using untested plant chemicals on living beings horrified them. Their advanced medical ethics required extensive computer modeling and safety testing before any new treatment could be tried. The risk is too great, Quillinex said. Unknown plant compounds could cause allergic reactions or toxic effects. We cannot approve such dangerous experimentation, but people are dying, Lisa said, standing up beside Jake. 3 students are in critical condition and more are getting sick. We have to try something, the debate continued for over an hour with the alien students arguing for caution and proper scientific procedure. They could not understand how humans would willingly test unknown chemicals on themselves. The concept of taking calculated risks seemed foreign to their way of thinking. Finally, Vexler raised all 4 arms for silence. Human students Jake and Lisa, you may proceed with your experiment, but only on yourselves and only in controlled conditions. If your plant treatment shows promise, we will conduct proper safety testing. That could take weeks, Jake protested. People need help now. Safety protocols exist for good reasons, Vexler replied firmly. Proceed with your test, but do not involve other students until we have complete data. Jake and Lisa left the assembly hall and walked across the facility grounds toward the area where the bellwort plants grew. Jake could see needleflies in the distance, but none came close to where they were walking. The plants were clearly having some effect. How do we do this? Lisa asked. I know humans use plants to repel insects, but I do not know the actual process. My grandmother taught me some of the old ways when I was a kid, Jake said. She lived through the resource wars when people had to survive without technology. You boil the leaves in water to extract the active compounds, then apply the liquid to your skin. Boil water. Lisa looked confused. You mean with fire, Jake realized. That Lisa, like most people from advanced Earth cities, had never actually made fire or boiled water without electric or fusion power. Yes, with fire. We burn wood or other fuel to heat water until it bubbles. That seems incredibly primitive, Lisa said, then caught herself. Sorry, I did not mean it is primitive, Jake agreed. But primitive does not mean useless. Sometimes simple solutions work better than complex ones. They gathered armfuls of the bellwort leaves, trying to pick only the ones that smelled strongest. The scent was sharp and clean, like mint mixed with pine needles. Jake could see why insects would find it unpleasant. Getting materials to make fire was harder than expected. The facility was so advanced that nothing was designed to burn. Even the wood from the purple trees was treated with fire-suppressant chemicals. Finally, Jake found some metal containers in the recycling center and gathered dry organic matter from the composting facility. Lisa watched nervously as Jake struck pieces of flint together trying to create sparks. "Are you sure this is safe?" she asked. "What if we start a forest fire? We are in a cleared area with water nearby," Jake said as he finally got some tinder to catch. "Besides, humans have been making fires for hundreds of thousands of years. It is one of the things that made us successful as a species." The small fire burned steadily, and Jake filled one of the metal containers with water from the facility supply. As the water heated, he added handfuls of the bellwort leaves. The mixture turned green and the smell became much stronger. "Now we wait for it to boil," Jake said. "When the water bubbles vigorously, the heat will extract the chemical compounds from the leaves." While they waited, several alien students approached, keeping a safe distance from the fire. The concept of using controlled combustion for practical purposes fascinated them. Their species had moved beyond such primitive methods millions of years ago. "Your people still use fire regularly?" asked Enoxian through his suit translator. "Not as much as we used to," Jake admitted. "But we remember how it is built into our culture and our survival instincts." Steam rose from the container as the water began to bubble. The smell of boiled bellwort was now so strong that Jake could see needle flies turning away from their area. Even the ones in the distance seemed to be avoiding their location. "It is working already," Lisa said excitedly. "Look at how the insects are staying away." Jake used a metal tool to remove the container from the fire and set it aside to cool. The liquid was now dark green and smelled like concentrated plant essence. "We need to let this cool down before we can use it." "Use it how exactly?" Lisa asked. "We apply it to our skin and clothes like sunscreen," Jake explained. "The scent and chemical residue should keep insects away for several hours. When the plant extract had cooled enough, Jake dipped his fingers in it and rubbed the liquid on his arms and neck. The sensation was cool and tingly, but not unpleasant. Lisa followed his example, covering her exposed skin with the green mixture. "How do we test if it works?" she asked. Jake pointed toward the forest where dark clouds of needleflies moved between the trees. "We go out there and see if they leave us alone." "That is insane," Lisa said. "What if it does not work? Then we run back here very fast," Jake replied with a grin. "But I think it will work. Plants and insects have been playing this game for millions of years." Jake and Lisa walked slowly toward the edge of the purple forest, where needlefly swarms moved like living storm clouds between the trees. The plant extract on their skin had dried to a thin green film that smelled strongly of mint and pine. Jake could feel his heart beating faster as they approached the danger zone. "Last chance to back out," he said to Lisa as they reached the tree line. "Not happening," she replied, though her voice was tight with nerves. "If this works, it could save lives. If it does not work, at least we will know." They stepped into the forest shadows where the first needleflies had been spotted yesterday. Jake expected to hear the immediate buzzing of an attacking swarm, but instead there was only the whisper of wind through the bell-shaped leaves overhead. A small group of needleflies approached from their left, moving in the characteristic tight formation that made them so dangerous. Jake held his breath as the insects came within a few meters of them. Then something remarkable happened. The swarm suddenly veered away as if hitting an invisible wall. "They are avoiding us," Lisa whispered, in amazement. The plant extract is actually working. More needleflies appeared from different directions, but the result was the same. Each swarm approached until they were about 3 meters away, then turned and flew in a different direction. The insects seemed unable or unwilling to come closer. Jake and Lisa walked deeper into the forest where yesterday the massive swarm had overwhelmed their entire field team. The area still showed signs of the attack, with broken equipment scattered on the ground and torn environmental suits hanging from tree branches. "This is incredible," Lisa said as she watched a large swarm part around them like water flowing around a rock. The chemical signature from the bellwort must be triggering some kind of avoidance response. My grandmother always said plants are smarter than we give them credit for, Jake replied. They have been developing chemical weapons and defenses since before animals even existed. They spent nearly an hour in the forest walking through areas that had been impossible to explore safely. Needleflies were everywhere, but none came within striking distance. The plant extract was providing perfect protection without any of the technological complexity that had failed the alien students. When they finally returned to the facility grounds, they found a crowd of alien students waiting for them. Word of their experiment had spread, and beings from multiple species watched nervously as the two humans emerged unharmed from needlefly territory. Impossible, said Quillinex, who was monitoring them with her medical scanner. You walked directly through confirmed swarm activity areas and received 0 stings. My instruments show thousands of needleflies in that forest. The plant extract works perfectly, Jake announced to the crowd. The insects cannot come within 3 meters of us. It is like we have an invisible shield. The alien students erupted in excited discussion. Light patterns flashed between Zephyrians while Noxians gestured rapidly with their tentacles. Even the usually calm Klaxons clicked and chirped among themselves. Vexter approached with his skin showing the deep blue of intense interest. Human Jake and Lisa, you have achieved something our most advanced scientists considered impossible. How did you know this would work? We did not know for certain, Jake admitted. But humans have been using plants to repel insects for thousands of generations. It was worth trying when the advanced methods failed, but the risk, protested a Zephyrian student through translated light patterns. You could have been killed testing unproven treatments. People were already being killed, Lisa pointed out. 3 students are still in critical condition, and more field teams are reporting attacks. We had to do something, a young Klaxon student approached hesitantly. Could you teach us to make this plant medicine? It asked in clicking translated speech. My clutch sibling is in the medical bay and I want to help with field research. Jake looked at the eager faces of alien students who had never boiled water or built a fire. These beings came from civilizations millions of years more advanced than humanity, but they needed to learn survival skills that human children mastered. It will not be easy, he warned. Making the extract requires fire, and most of you have never worked with combustion before. It can be dangerous if you are not careful. We will learn, said Quillinex firmly. If primitive methods can succeed where advanced technology fails, then we must adapt. Jake spent the rest of the day teaching basic fire-making and plant preparation to groups of alien students. The process was more difficult than he had expected because concepts that seemed natural to humans were completely foreign to other species. The Zephyrians had particular trouble with fire since their crystalline bodies were designed to channel energy rather than create heat through combustion. Jake had to show them how to use tools and protective equipment to avoid damaging their delicate crystal structures. The Noxians struggled with the concept of boiling water since their methane-based biology used completely different temperature and pressure relationships. Their environmental suits made it hard for them to judge when the water was hot enough. Even species that should have understood combustion had difficulty. The Klaxons had evolved past using fire so long ago that the knowledge had been lost from their cultural memory. They approached the flames with the same caution humans might show toward radioactive materials. This is harder than quantum mechanics, complained one Klaxon student as it tried to light tinder with shaking hands. How do human children learn such complex procedures? Practice, Jake replied patiently, and necessity. When your survival depends on something, you learn it quickly. By evening, Jake had taught nearly 50 alien students the basics of fire-making and plant extraction. Most of them managed to produce some version of the insect repellent, though the quality varied widely. Some made it too weak and others boiled it too long until the active compounds broke down. Lisa worked with the more scientifically minded students to document the process and identify which plants on Kepler 442b had similar properties to the bellwort. They found dozens of species that contained compounds with potential repellent effects. We should test these systematically, Lisa suggested as she examined samples under a microscope. There might be plants that work even better than bellwort. Good idea, Jake agreed. But we should also teach people to recognize useful plants without instruments. What happens if your scanner breaks and you need protection that evening? Vexler called another assembly to discuss the day's developments. The main hall was full again as word had spread throughout the facility about the success of human plant medicine. Even students from the medical bay had come to hear the results. Fellow students, today we have learned an important lesson about the value of diverse knowledge, Vexler announced. Human survival techniques have provided a solution that our most advanced technology could not achieve. A Noxian student raised a tentacle. Will we be adding primitive survival skills to the galactic education curriculum? Primitive is not the correct word, Vexler replied. These are proven techniques developed through thousands of generations of testing. We should call them foundational knowledge. Jake stood up to address the crowd. Tomorrow, Lisa and I will lead field expeditions using plant-based protection. Anyone who wants to participate can join us, but you must be able to make your own repellent and maintain a fire for emergencies. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Nearly every student in the hall volunteered to join the expedition. Species that had fled in terror from needleflies now wanted to return to the forest, protected by nothing more than boiled plant juice. One more thing, Jake added. We will be traveling light with minimal technology. No energy shields or environmental suits beyond basic protection. We will rely on human-style survival techniques. This caused some nervous discussion among the alien students, but none withdrew from the expedition. The success of the plant repellent had convinced them that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most reliable. As the assembly broke up, Jake noticed groups of students gathering around small fires throughout the facility grounds. The sight of controlled flames still made many aliens nervous, but they were determined to master these ancient skills. Lisa joined him at the window of their dormitory as they watched a Zephyrian student successfully light a fire for the first time. The crystal being's light patterns showed pure joy as small flames began to consume the tinder. Who would have thought that teaching aliens to make fire would be part of our education experience? Lisa said with a smile. Maybe that is what humans are supposed to contribute to the galaxy, Jake replied. Not just advanced technology, but the wisdom of remembering where we came from. Jake woke to the sound of alien students practicing fire making in the courtyard below his window. The klaxon named Hexstar was finally managing to create consistent sparks while a group of Zephyrians offered encouragement through supportive light patterns. The sight made him smile as he remembered his own childhood struggles learning the same skills from his grandmother. Lisa knocked their signal for Expedition Day, and Jake responded with enthusiasm. Today would be the first major field trip using human survival techniques instead of advanced galactic technology. Nearly 60 students from 8 different species had volunteered to participate. At the morning briefing, Vexler looked nervous despite his confident words. Today we test whether traditional human knowledge can replace our standard safety protocols. Each team must demonstrate basic fire-making skills and plant identification before departure. Jake and Lisa moved between the groups, helping students who were still struggling with fundamental concepts. A young Noxian named Wibguz had learned to make fire but kept forgetting that the flames needed fuel to continue burning. His environmental suit made it difficult for him to judge when to add more material to keep the fire alive. Think of fire as a living thing, Jake explained patiently. It needs to eat fuel and breathe air to survive. If you starve it or smother it, the fire will die. Living fire, Wibguz repeated through his translator. My people stopped using combustion so long ago we forgot it was a biological process. Zixtal, Zephyrian, had recovered from her needlefly injuries and was eager to rejoin field work. Her crystal body still showed hairline cracks from the toxic shock, but her light patterns were bright and determined. She had become surprisingly good at fire-making despite the risk to her delicate structure. Human knowledge saved my life. She flashed in blue and gold patterns. I want to learn everything your species can teach. The expedition departed in simple hover vehicles with minimal technology. Instead of advanced scanners and energy shields, each student carried basic supplies, including fire-making materials, plant identification guides, and containers for preparing repellent extracts. Jake felt strange leading a group of beings whose civilizations were millions of years more advanced than humanity. But in this forest with its aggressive insects and chemical plant defenses, his species' ancient knowledge was more valuable than quantum computers or faster-than-light travel. Their first stop was the Grove of Whispers, where the original needle fly attack had occurred. The bell-shaped leaves still whispered in the wind, but now the sounds seemed welcoming rather than ominous. Jake could see needlefly swarms in the distance, but they maintained their respectful distance from the plant-protected expedition. Begin gathering bellwort leaves for your personal protection, Jake announced. Remember to select only the ones with the strongest scent and avoid damaging the root systems. Watching 60 alien students harvest plants by hand was both amusing and touching. Beings who normally relied on automated systems carefully examined each leaf and tested its aromatic properties. The Klaxons were particularly good at this since their compound eyes could detect chemical signatures that other species missed. Lisa had identified several other plants with repellent properties and was teaching students to recognize them. This one we call stingwort because of the sharp smell, she explained, holding up a spiky purple plant. The active compounds are different from bellwort, but just as effective against needleflies. A healer student named Quothman was taking detailed notes on everything. These plant identification skills could be useful on any world, she observed. Most species rely too heavily on electronic scanners. Humans call it bushcraft, Jake said. The ability to survive and thrive using only what nature provides. It was how our ancestors lived for thousands of generations. The group spread out through the forest practicing their newly learned skills. Jake watched with pride as alien students who had fled in terror just days before now moved confidently through needlefly territory. The plant extracts provided perfect protection, and the knowledge of how to make more gave them confidence. Hexstar, the young Klaxon, made an interesting discovery near a stream that glowed with blue phosphorescence. Human Jake, please examine this plant, it called. The chemical signature is similar to your earth mint, but much more concentrated. Jake studied the plant, which had broad leaves covered in tiny hairs that released a powerful menthol scent when touched. This could be even better than bellwort, he said. The concentration of active compounds is incredible. They prepared a test batch using the new plant, and found that it provided protection for nearly twice as long as bellwort extract. More importantly, the scent was pleasant to most species while being strongly repulsive to insects. We should call it Galaxy Mint, Lisa suggested as she recorded its properties. The first plant discovered through interspecies cooperation. As the day progressed, Jake began teaching more advanced survival skills to students who had mastered the basics. He showed them how to identify edible plants, distinguish poisonous species, and find clean water sources without electronic assistance. These skills might seem primitive to you, he explained to a group of Zephyrian students, but they represent thousands of years of accumulated knowledge. Every technique has been tested by generations of humans who needed them to survive. The most remarkable part of the day was watching how quickly the alien students adapted to human methods. Species that had evolved complex technological solutions to simple problems discovered the satisfaction of direct hands-on approaches. Wibgaz the Noxion managed to start a fire using only flint, and Steel then used it to boil water and extract plant compounds, all without relying on his suit's electronic systems. This is meditation, he said wonderingly. Working directly with natural materials requires complete focus. Even Vexthur, who had been skeptical of primitive methods, was taking notes as he observed the expedition. The psychological effects are as important as the practical results, he observed. Students who master these skills show increased confidence and self-reliance. Late in the afternoon, they encountered their first real test when a massive needlefly swarm moved toward their location. The cloud of insects was larger than any they had seen before stretching between the trees like a living curtain. "Everyone remain calm," Jake called out. "Check your plant protection and maintain group formation. The insects cannot hurt us if we stay covered with repellent." The swarm approached to, within their usual 3-meter boundary, then seemed to hit an invisible wall. Thousands of needleflies pressed against the chemical barrier created by plant extracts but could not advance further. The aliens watched in amazement as the insects swirled around them without being able to attack. "Incredible," whispered Quillinex as she recorded the encounter. "Perfect protection using nothing but local plant chemistry and human knowledge." One young Zephyrian student began to panic as needleflies pressed close to the barrier. Her light patterns flashed red and white, indicating fear and stress. Jake moved quickly to her side. "Look at me, not at the insects," he said calmly. "You are completely safe. The plants are protecting you just like they protected Lisa and me yesterday." The student's light patterns gradually shifted from red to blue as she regained control. "How do you stay so calm?" she asked. "These creatures tried to kill us before experience," Jake replied. "Humans face dangerous situations often enough to learn how to manage fear. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite being afraid." The encounter lasted nearly an hour as the massive swarm tested every part of their protective barrier. But the plant extracts held firm, and eventually the needleflies moved on to seek easier prey elsewhere. That evening, back at the facility, the expedition members shared their experiences with other students. The success of human survival techniques had created enormous interest throughout the academic community. Today we learned that advanced technology is not always superior to traditional knowledge, Wexler announced at dinner. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the most reliable because they have been tested by time. Jake found himself surrounded by alien students eager to learn more about human survival skills. They wanted to know about everything from food preservation to weather prediction to natural navigation techniques. "Your species carries so much practical wisdom," said Zixtel through her light patterns. "We have focused on technological advancement and forgotten the value of direct interaction with natural systems. Every species has something valuable to contribute," Jake replied. "Humans just happen to be good at the basic survival skills because we needed them more recently than most species." Lisa was working with the facility's botanists to catalog all the useful plants they had discovered. Their field guide now included over 40 species with various properties from insect repellent to wound healing to water purification. "This knowledge could be useful on colony worlds throughout the galaxy," she explained to Quothman. "Settlers often face situations where high technology is not available or has failed." As the weeks passed, Jake and Lisa found themselves teaching regular workshops on human survival techniques. Students came from other facilities and even from off-world to learn these ancient skills.